All right, I am so stoked to be the MC for Digital Voices, and thank you everyone for joining us. The response has been over the top amazing, I think threefold more than we expected, and our expectations were pretty high to begin with. So my name is Ed. I serve as the Chief Digital Officer for Tech Mahindra Health and Life Sciences, and I'm part of the original 13 CDOs who formed a loose association of CDOs across health and life sciences. And I'll explain a little bit more about that in a second. But I first just wanted to welcome you. It's going to be an amazing day. I am really psyched because the speaker lineup is incredible. And I think you already know who they are and the schedule, but I'll review them really quickly. So how this ended up being put together, Digital Voices, was really an identified need that 13 of us had, 13 CDOs across all of health and life sciences. So this would be like payer, provider, pharma, the whole life sciences really, biotech and medical devices. And we were thinking about an association for CDOs. So there's associations for other professionals, but none in healthcare for chief digital officers. And another key differentiator was we didn't want to be just with other people in the payer community, for instance, or the provider community, but rather an association of CDOs across the entire health and life sciences. Because one of the issues and challenges that we're all faced with on a daily basis is a lack of exchange between all these different components of what comprise health and life sciences. And so it's like, let's remove those barriers and learn from each other and have natural dialogue. So that's really the why. So why did we want to form this association? One is to encourage one another. So only a CDO knows what another CDO is going through. One other one was networking. Again, I want to know my peers in the payer side, the pharma side, the provider side, not just within my own particular domain. And then we wanted to add value. So that's really what we are intending to do today in the next hour and a half, 2 hours, is just add some value to everyone who are chief digital officers in health and life sciences, and perhaps share something that you might not have thought of before, or might encourage you or motivate you or help you to think of the next level of innovation. So that's really sort of the why doing what we're doing. And also we're going to do good. So we're going to come together once a year and we're going to do something good for society. We're going to take our skills and talents and apply them in an area that's perhaps underserved. And so it's really about creating good as well. And so if you are interested, you're a chief digital officer in health and life sciences, interested in joining us, we would love to have you. So you can connect with us on LinkedIn or our emails. You can reach out to any one of us, and we're all listed on our Digital Voices website. And just connect with us, and we're happy to have you. And it's a loose affiliation. And I can tell you a couple things that we already decided. One is there's no sales, no vendors ever. So we are not going to be an association that's supported by vendors. Okay, there's great reasons that people do that. We decided we're not going to do that. So we'll remain a low budget, loose affiliation of chief digital officers doing all the things that I just described. So that's why we're really excited. So it's a trusted zone. It's a sales-free zone. We come from all sorts of companies and organizations that are part of health life sciences, but you never have to worry that someone is really there because they're trying to make a sale. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just not part of our association. So we really feel like we're going to fill this gap that I've been describing. There's nothing today for CDOs in healthcare across all the verticals that I mentioned. So really that's what we're all about. So we would love to have you. And I think you'll be able to tell by the program today just how special our association will be. And again, reach out to any of the original 13. I drew the short straw as the MC today. Others will be speaking today, but you probably know one of us. Just reach out to us. So again, we're going to cover the spectrum with our 5 speakers, including one from the outside. And that's another thing we're going to be doing as part of our association, is bringing in CDOs from other verticals, other industries who can share with us some best practices and things that they've learned. So the schedule is online. I think you know about the schedule. So I will introduce the first speaker in just a second. Before I do, we're live chatting. So you might be on LinkedIn or YouTube, but definitely on YouTube is where speakers will live chat with you as well as myself. And you can chat with everyone else as well. So if you go on the YouTube and you look at the chat function, interact with us, engage with us. So as you hear a speaker speaking in their pre-recorded session, they'll be there live with you interacting. So you can say, hey, Angela, what did you mean by this? Or what did you mean by that? Or did you ever think of this other particular best practice? So really, really open to chatting with you and being very interactive. All right, so you don't really want to hear much more from me. I'll pop in and out introducing speakers as we move along. But I think everyone, including myself, wants to dive right in and talk about the speakers. So I have the privilege, again, being the MC and introducing our speakers today. Our first one is Angela Yoakum. I've met Angela. She is a rock star, just as her bio, as I share a few highlights with you, would indicate. She's awesome. She's innovative, creative, passionate. I'm so happy, Angela, that you've come into healthcare. I think what we've needed for a long time are individuals, professionals coming externally into healthcare to really help us get to that next level in terms of digital transformation. So a few things about Angela: CDO at Novant Health, huge health system serving North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia. And previously to that, she was actually in my neck of the woods in Dallas-Fort Worth, where she was the executive vice president of digital channels for Rent-A-Center. And before Rent-A-Center, she served as a global chief information officer at BDP International, one of the largest privately held non-asset-based logistic companies in the world. And before that, AstraZeneca. So she already had a healthcare background. She got more best practice, other industries, engaging with consumers, the experience, and brought that over. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Angela. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me to speak to such a great group of digital experts. It's an honor to be part of this conversation, and I look forward to more live interaction over time. So today, I'll talk about the lessons we can derive from other industries and apply to the way we accelerate the evolution of healthcare. We've seen some of these lessons applied at forward-thinking systems who are changing the way they think about the capabilities required to achieve the outcomes that we all want for our patients and communities. Foundationally, the world is changing more rapidly than ever before, and this change is being felt in every industry. So first, let's talk about some cross-industry trends and how they apply to healthcare. So first, the strength of your ecosystem is a differentiating factor. Long gone are the days when all the competitive ideas come from within a company's four walls. And I think most industries have realized that differentiation doesn't come from a big vendor's roadmap either. Across industries, companies that are finding ways to engage with startups and universities and other research institutions and inventors and tinkerers and even some research groups inside of big vendors who are willing to engage differently are able to flex and be very intentional about the way they define and deliver solutions that will set them apart from their competitors. They'll simply have more options. You know the old argument, buy versus build? A lot of the time, the right answer is somewhere in the middle with co-creation, adoption of components that fit into the current state but can evolve as the business evolves, and so on. So this past year, as an example, we even partnered with a design and engineering company that builds Formula One and NASCAR race cars. And they had super smart people with heavy engineering skills, as you'd expect, and it was a pleasure to work with them. Co-opetition is another great method that was introduced by the thought leaders in reality TV. But sometimes working with a competitor to achieve something that will elevate the service that you both offer to the community is the best and fastest way to advance. We certainly see it in healthcare this year, perhaps more than ever before, as we battle a global pandemic. So the lesson here is to make sure you're never making another buy versus build decision, and that instead you are building a diverse ecosystem of contributors of all types who will allow you and your teams to grow and differentiate over time. Another trend that we see across many industries is the evolution of consumer appetites. So our patients and the communities that we serve are all consumers of our products and services. They're being trained by other industries in many different methods of engagement, and their expectations of service levels are higher now than ever before. It's a very good thing for healthcare. So let's talk about why. First, our patients expect to be able to engage us across multiple channels. So if they can order a pizza by tweet or by Slack channel, then we should make it just as easy to schedule an appointment or pay a bill. The easier we make it for our patients to manage their health through engagement with the healthcare community, the more likely our patients are to stay healthy and avoid major health events through preventative means. And this not only requires contemporary looking design and consumer grade tools that we put in the hands of our patients, but also investments into the back-end architectures that enable transactional integrity between channels. So this notion of transactional integrity is pretty important. So let's talk about what I mean by that. There's some great examples in banking and retail and other industries. So in banking, if you go online to transfer money from one account to another, and while you're in the middle of that transaction, imagine your internet connectivity drops, you expect to be able to call or text a helpline or walk into a bank branch and have a representative be able to see the exact status of your transaction. You expect to be able to complete or continue your transaction in a different channel from where you initiated the transaction. In retail, same thing. If you use an app to order a big screen TV, you expect to have the option to pick up that TV in a nearby store. The transaction has integrity across all channels. In healthcare, some of the integrity is enabled by the use of a single EHR, right? Most healthcare systems of any size have done this, particularly in terms of clinical engagements. But in the case where I start a video visit with my physician, and then I need to finish the exam in a clinic, or heaven forbid in the emergency department, making that transition seamless requires us to have another layer in place. So we need a place to capture non-clinical experiential information and allow that engagement to be carried over from channel to channel. We want to avoid the feeling of disjointedness that a patient could feel going from one location, virtual or otherwise, to another. Now, the optimal solution sets are going to be different for everybody. But in the case where a patient moves from a virtual visit into a clinic, you might need a strong CRM capability to track non-clinical patient communication outside of the EHR. You'd probably want some geofencing based auto check-in. At the clinic, you'd probably have virtual waiting rooms with direct to exam room wayfinding and so on. When the clinician enters the exam room to see the patient after verifying the identity, they can pick right back up with the appropriate context and of course still have access to the clinical information and vitals that may have been collected remotely through advanced sensor tech that and loaded into the EHR. Healthcare organizations have focused so much on perfecting their collection and protection of clinical data, and rightly so, that some have maybe forgotten to also collect and act upon that customer experience data that informs every engagement the patient has with us. And so I think there's a lot to be learned cross industry in the consumer engagement space. Another trend that I think it's worth talking about today is the traditional constraints to competition that continue to loosen. So other industries have been feeling the crunch of new entrants skimming off the new lucrative business for decades now. We saw this in e-commerce versus physical retail stores, right? Virtual banking versus local banking in a branch. Uber and Lyft versus taxis, Airbnb versus hotels and hospitality. Small, well-funded research labs versus big pharma, and so on and on and on. Successful organizations, regardless of industry, are able to flex, and they can respond to the emergence of unconventional competitors. I mentioned pizza earlier. Maybe I'm just hungry, but Domino's is a great example of a company that responded to the expansion of food delivery options by making their pizza more available than other restaurants could do through Uber Eats or DoorDash. You can, in fact, tweet or text or post an order on a Slack channel. You can drop a pin where you want the pizza delivered. And sometimes even a robot or an autonomous vehicle of some sort could get it to you while you're standing in the middle of a pedestrian zone. It's a great example of a company expanding ahead of others who started to encroach upon their traditional point of differentiation, which was, the 30-minute delivery. So So what is the healthcare equivalent? One area is digital health. I think certainly during the COVID crisis, most systems have adopted a digital health capability, and rightly so. Past expansion had been limited, not by the technology capabilities, but by regulatory restrictions, business decisions. There were licensing restrictions, which seem to be loosened now in the COVID crisis. Their reimbursement philosophies are changing during this crisis. It's all great for our patients, and we should continue to encourage these changes. But if we're not keeping up with and in creating differentiating services in this space, we're at risk of losing this part of our business to others in and outside of our geography and in and outside our core business. Another business threat that's fairly immediate is the phenomenon that we see of small footprint specialty outpatient centers who are skimming off lucrative elective procedures and leaving large healthcare systems just to running EDs. The loss of specialty services and elective procedures will hit traditional healthcare hard. The fragmentation of these services to the patient are going to create a further disjointed experience for them, and it's going to result in less healthy communities. So the lesson, I guess, here is that others will continue to come after your market. You know, don't think it's all tied up because of past barriers to entry. Companies that are bigger, have deep pockets, and can literally buy your customers and your markets will be coming. So what do? You have to be nimble, of course, fast. You have to offer new services, new products, outrun well-funded big guys from other industries, stay ahead with differentiating solutions. You know, and for goodness sakes, do not listen to anyone who tells you the right thing to do at these times is to go back to basics. So the last trend I'll talk to you about today is something that we've seen in many other industries, and it's worth discussing in terms of healthcare. M&A activity is rampant. There are lots of industries engaging in M&A, and I want to talk a little bit about this phenomenon because I think it's important to understand what it means when a company chooses to outrun its losses through an acquisition. So the amount of M&A we see in other industries that are also under attack, like retail, is really extraordinary. Taking retail as an example, traditional brick and mortar retailers have been upended by online retailers for decades now. When two traditional retail companies who are losing ground join forces, they combine their revenues and reduce overall operating expenses by eliminating, redundant functions. So the day the books close, they look like they're doing pretty well. The CEOs get a big bonus and off they go. But then the next year, or maybe 2 years later, because they have not changed their strategy or their underlying approach to the way they make money, they're losing money again because their industry's under attack until the next acquisition. And then they outrun the loss once again. The retailers continue to outrun their losses through these sorts of serial acquisitions. Now, the traditional retailers who have held their own and done well as their industry comes under attack, or I should say evolves significantly, are not only engaging in this sort of M&A activity, but they're also buying up adjacent businesses, and they're partnering with others in completely different businesses. So take, for example, the big retailers that we've all seen who now offer healthcare or optometry or Starbucks coffee stands inside of their physical footprint. It's not because these partnerships make them a lot of money directly, but because they bring in foot traffic. They create a destination feeling for their consumers. It's a brilliant expansion into adjacent spaces for them. So in healthcare, it's easy to imagine the different sorts of acquisitions and partnerships that we might be exploring along these lines. You see a lot of healthcare companies buying up software companies. That makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons. It's important for our teams to be prepared for unexpected acquisitions and unconventional acquisitions. Earlier this year, before we all went on lockdown, my last extended staff meeting, so my directs and then their directs, we ended up with, I think, about 75 or maybe 100 people in the room. And I asked them to imagine, they were broken out into groups, and I asked them to imagine that we were requiring a major airline. That, just to be clear, we are not acquiring a major airline, but that exercise allowed me and my senior staff to see how my very smart team thinks about these sorts of things. What would it take to acquire that airline? How would we manage the integration? What are the sorts of opportunities that may now exist as a result of our partnership and our joint ownership? So, and by the way, how prepared are we for such an integration? I encourage you to try something similar with your teams. It's always good to be prepared for the unexpected. So time's running short. I'm going to leave my comments there. Thanks for the chance to reflect upon some of these cross-industry lessons that we've recognized here at Novant Health. I look forward to hearing from all of you and seeing your continued innovations and successes. Please enjoy the rest of the conclave.
All right, that was so awesome. It was as good as I expected, and the chat, really lively chat. So keep chatting it up, and Angela's on there interacting with everyone. So that's making the experience even that much more rich. I love the idea of the co-creation and the F1, formula cars, companies working with some companies completely outside of healthcare, bringing in sort of the new creativity, new thoughts, new passion. It was awesome. And then talking about the consumer expectations and giving all those examples. I mean, that was just power pack. And I think, judging from the chat and the comments, the whole thing around engaging the patient, it seems so obvious, but I don't know that many of us do it. And having 7,500 patients involved in a variety of groups, or if it was 7,500 patient groups, one or the other, either way, it's impressive. So those are just outstanding ideas that any of us as chief digital officers, leaders in healthcare can bring to our organization. So thank you, Angela. You're the bomb. I just knew. So I'm so thankful, grateful. So moving on, because again, you want to hear less of me and more of our speakers. Our next speaker is Milan Kumkalkar. And so you'll love Milan as well. I watched him, I stalked him on TED Talks. And he is the CDO at Celerity, which is a flagship pioneering company for the design of novel medicines, targeting cell behavior. So super, super interesting, super important. But what I liked best is he's a Ramones fan. So we actually spent so much time talking about music, and it just reminded me of sometimes when my dogs are out of control during a call like this, I play the Ramones to help calm them down. They love the Ramones as well. But anyways, Milan is a great individual as well, a great leader. I already mentioned his TED Talks. He's considered a top 150 leader and thought leader in digital health specifically, big into AI, big data. He serves on numerous boards. He's an advisor to startups and VC firms, all focused on life sciences through digital and again, data and AI. Just another phenomenal speaker we have ready for you. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over, and here we go with Milan.
So hi, my name is Milind Kamkolkar. I'm the Chief Digital and Data Officer for Celerity, a flagship pioneering company. We're a company that is pioneering a way of looking at biology new from an emergent lens in many ways, from the perspective of cell behaviors. And using those cell behaviors and our understanding of cell behaviors in disease biology to identify and generate new medicines for previously complicated diseases or diseases we're aware of today, where the reductionist approach of trying to identify a gene, protein, or pathway singularly has not really yielded in many ways a comprehensive solution for patient care. I've been here for almost 2 years. Prior to that, my history has been in different startup companies since the dawn of the Human Genome Project, and working in informatics companies that really tried to consumerize that, specifically double twist. Effectively, a number of folks started from Apple who had this vision of how do we consumerize the Human Genome Project. I've been in large-scale consulting and boutique consulting to think about how do you really do transformational programs at scale across multiple countries. I've also been in specific niche areas and how do you apply innovation to rethink, if you will, or reimagine the nature of much of what our industry has thought about. And last but not least, I was the first chief data officer in the pharmaceutical industry from an enterprise perspective. And all of these culminations kind of led me to really thinking about what did I want to do when I grow up, particularly in my last gig at Sanofi, of course, prior to that as the head of AI and data science at Novartis. And I think it came down to really three things. And I find that this tends to resonate also with a number of different chief digital officers or data officers that are emerging in the industry today. The first thing is having a grassroots basis of what is the core business of any initiative where a digital operating model can in fact be applied. In my case, and what I believe is in the pharmaceutical industry, it is really in the nature of understanding biology and creating medicines to target that biology so that it can help humans, frankly, when they are either sick or facing ailment. The second thing that I believe is critical when thinking about how do you really embrace the role of a chief digital officer or a CDO, let's, for argument's sake, the D could be digital, data, all of the above, is the fact that we have two objectives really in being this digital or data officer. The first objective is to what I call do things better. Do things better to me are the operational efficiencies under which technology, processes, and skill sets can be applied to really amplify, if you will, or accelerate the opportunity to do, if you will, things that were once held as sacred cows faster, better, or cheaper. And when you look at the advent of digital in much of these companies, we can argue that that is where the major focus, if you will, of business transformation is taken today. To be clear, can we identify targets faster? Can we accelerate the development of chemical compounds towards an IND stage faster, cheaper? When we run clinical trials, can we make them more efficient? I think if anything, what COVID has taught us is that the notion of virtual trials is already an opportunity that we could use so that we're not held captive, if you will, with site-specific ways of organizing and managing and running the trials. Additionally, in the space, be it from the first time we experience, if you will, or have an opportunity to engage with a patient, the notion of customer experience and customer engagement comes up. And now here is where, if you will, the opportunity to think horizontally across different industries, take those horizontal learnings, but now configure them towards the regulatory standards that actually exist in our arena, whether it's from Salesforce optimization, marketing excellence, or in fact how we price drugs and be able to forecast the nature of pricing drugs by taking advantage of data types, by taking advantage of technologies and other such approaches, orthogonal data sources as well, to really start identifying what is the best pricing structure for a given medicine, and how then do we engage really at nurturing the relationship between a physician and a patient. I'm a big believer, and we often think about the notion of customer engagement in the pharmaceutical setting. We typically think about it primarily from how do we improve patient engagement. I would argue, though, that is not the most or the only important relationship. In fact, it's actually that sacred relationship between primarily a patient and their physician, where we can amplify, if you will, the nature of engagement with a physician, and we can amplify the nature of an engagement with a patient, whether it be understanding and being aware of disease biology indications they may be facing as a patient. It may be encouraging then the broader network of those people, such as caregivers, nurses, other such staff that are vital to the support of the patient journey. But really thinking about where do we engage them throughout the context, if you will, from awareness to adherence to hopefully cure or disease management. And when you think about all of those things combined, these are all effectively operational efficiencies, as I mentioned earlier. The second piece of digital, as we consider the role of the CDO in a pharma company, is what you could call doing better things. And in doing better things, we may rephrase that as breakthrough innovation, 10x thinking, really going for exponential gain. And what you find actually is in most companies, this is really where the change management occurs. Because this is really where processes that exist today, workflows that enable a particular endpoint to be reached today, are now treated as sacred cows. Why? It's very difficult to create breakthrough or disruptive innovation if you're not prepared to actually break and move through, or if you're not prepared to disrupt current mindsets. You can always have the same process, but it could be done exponentially better, which is more than just a performance gain, but it in fact is very much a business gain. So you could argue, when you think about combining those two equations now, doing things better or doing better things, the doing things better is often an economic denominator that a CDO today must be able to articulate effectively in order to gain the change management necessary of an organization to adopt those capabilities. For doing better things, this is where now certainly a bit of cheerleading experience, if you will, helps, but also the notion of empowering people to make sure that it's their idea. And I think what we've seen in the industry so far is that many of these digital organizations have grown initially as sort of the shiny new toy or shiny new object-based organizations with limited budgets, where it was often done as a nice to have, to now where we're seeing today P&L responsibilities, profit and loss responsibilities, with respect to the economic advantage a digital innovation can actually lead. In fact, I would take it even one step further, that the benefit of being able to work in a digital operating model is where that operating model in and of itself aligns the organization to the forward-looking years to come. It helps prep them to be, frankly, a more nimble business. The data and analytics that comes through there is really where the value creation comes. So when I look at a CDO today, I really view the CDO's role in pharma as being one of an innovation agent, two of a business leader with real P&L responsibility, and last but not least, the opportunity to be someone who can share that knowledge, because if you look also at the tenure of most CDOs in industry, they tend to be around 2 to 3 years on average. That's important to recognize, because pharma companies today, if they're going to institute a CDO, they need to also create the career path and the progression, if you will, of what that CDO's role may be. A good friend of mine who was once the first CDO and in industry, she was a CDO of Harvard, once told me that, you know, our roles in many ways are roles that are destined to be eliminated over a period of years. Why? Because now the digital operating model is simply business. It's not digital, it's just the operating model. Also, the utility of data and being a data conscious organization, not necessarily a data driven organization, but really a data conscious organization, is one where the blending of both knowledge, experience, and numbers can come together to derive an insight to make better decision making through that organization. I would urge, though, that all CDOs in pharma need to also consider what I would call digital dystopia. Digital dystopia is a real thing. We've seen it already play out in the healthcare field, specifically the role that misinformation or extrapolated information or retracted information can have in the world of what I would say is becoming more common, bench chair science or armchair science. And armchair science is really the philosophy where, with all due respect to BuzzFeed, where BuzzFeed and a Nature journal actually sit on the same plane in terms of factual accuracy and to be able to determine what sickness and health actually looks like and how people should engage with that specific information. I also find that when you do create this dystopian outlet, excuse me, whether it be through the sharing of information or the promotion of specific material, I think every CDO out there at the top of their agenda should also be considering developing proactively the antidote to dystopian fallout that comes as a result of digital engagement. For example, when you're thinking about a wearable whose interface with a patient is an app, if we take in the area of depression as an example, and you may use some very, very sophisticated computer vision algorithms that are able to detect facial constructs that indicate someone may be going through a depression state. The last thing you want to do is to irresponsibly place a quantitative chart that indicates how depressed they are. And I have seen these time and time again in the pursuit of what I would say frivolous mindsets, inconsiderate mindsets, trying to build up applications simply because it's a cool app. When in actual fact, the reality of that situation is potentially moving that existing patient into even more severe depression. I find that we as CDOs have a huge responsibility on our shoulders to shepherd, if you will, shareholders' interests. And these shareholders are not just financial shareholders, but it's also our patient advocates. It is also trial advocates or investigator advocates. It is also scientific advocacy as well. And the opportunity that digital brings to the table is to start creating narratives that are more digestible to the appropriate audience at hand, whether it in fact be from a simple dashboard in an app to a more digestible format of real science happening today. For me, I think if anything, one of the learnings we can take coming from COVID is seeing the number of people who now understand what a cytokine storm is, as an example, or the number of people that talk about the spikes on the COVID protein, or the number of people that are thinking through why exactly is a mask important and what is it actually doing? In many of these instances, digital has a role to play. For example, as you've probably heard, I've had a bit of a cough right now. I can tell you it's funny how the conversations with people today, I have to almost say, look, it's not COVID, but it is an allergy. But the fact that we have these seasonal fluctuations is something that, frankly, one would expect at this time of the year, which can be a digital incentive to be able to promote and help understand potential pathology and the support of a patient. So I want to leave you with this, if you don't mind. Being a CDO is not an easy task. Being a CDO requires you to be a smart business person first and foremost. It also requires you in parallel to be a respectful human being, humble in knowing that your contributions can actually make a major difference at bare minimum to an individual's patient life, and in the best case scenario to the supporting infrastructure around those patients that enable that person to live a fulfilling life. It also requires you, as I mentioned earlier, to be someone who is not seeking attention, if you will, simply to say, look how wonderful they are and all of the wonderful insights they are. I, in fact, share with much of my team who are infinitely smarter than I am when it comes to machine learning and digital aspects and breaking the norm, if you will, is the fact that, look, what I can give to them are simply anecdotal experiences that I hope may help shape them be the future leaders who either take on my job or take on a much better version of what I do today that is more relevant for the society that we're creating as a future. CDOs have that in their job description, although it may not often be spelled out. Technology alone, as we all know, probably as CDOs, is not the rate limiting factor. In fact, adoption, interpolation, and interpretation is often the most important thing that we in our roles are expected to do. With that, I thank you for paying attention and for listening to my little diatribe. And I wish all of you budding CDOs or people who will collaborate with your chief digital or data officers in the future, understand how you can best support them. More importantly, how you can best leverage those capabilities. Thank you.
All right, that was like a blitzkrieg bomb. My mind is like going nuts trying to process everything I just heard. Thank you so much, Melinda. That was incredible. You know, some of the things I wrote down, so many things. It's hard to pick just a couple. I think one good summary is the thing that you said about Disney plus pharma is pediatrics, right? Bringing in design thinking from other industries, combining those special combinations, and Angela touched on that too with the F1 example, really can recreate the entire experience. But ultimately, there's a couple other things, and I'll get back to the ultimate. But the other things were the digital Disturbia, love it. The cesspool pilots, we all know about that. The digestible narratives. There was so much content there. But this is the one, this is how I would sum it up, is because it's a great reminder that we're sharing all this. We're spending some time today talking about all this stuff, and you know, chief digital officers getting together. But the bottom line at the end of the day, right, is to take whatever we're responsible for in provider side, payer, pharma, and biotech, and really help with helping others have fulfilling lives. And thank you for recentering us, because as great, as fun and important all the other stuff is, that at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. All right, so lots of pressure on our next guest. And so I told you, part of our CDO association, we're always open to the outside to learn best practices. And so at every event, we'll always have a guest from the outside. And I'm so thrilled to have Steve Chung with us from Fox television station. So this is from a media perspective. So it'd be really interesting. He is the chief digital officer for Fox Televisions, oversees all aspects of the digital business. So think about that, right? From a media perspective, being responsible for all digital. He's a longtime leader, not just with Fox, but before that, with Fortune 100 experience spanning media and emerging technologies, including over-the-top OTT, video and streaming services. He is joined by Justin. Justin's someone that I get to serve with on occasion. Justin is a principal of customer experience management at the Born Group, one of the world's leading creative content as well as commerce organizations like marketing and advertising, but much more. And Justin spearheads all of Born's industry-leading practices of consulting, implementation, services, all sorts of industry-leading content across industries. So he's bringing that same perspective, and you'll hear now them talk about, you know, things from a digital officer perspective, but from media. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve and Justin.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Justin Stayrook. I am the head of customer experience at Born Agency, which is a Tech Mahindra company. Good to see everyone here today. I am pleased to have as a special guest, Steve Chung, who is CDO of Fox Television.
All right. Thanks, Justin. Thanks for letting me crash the party.
Yeah, yeah, very good. So we have a few questions. We'll do a little bit of a Q&A. Hopefully everyone will find it quite interesting, and Steve can expand upon some of his roles and responsibilities as CDO. I know this is a healthcare oriented session, Steve. So CDOs have only been a staple in the C-suite for the last 5 or 10 years or so. For those that don't know or aren't sure what a CDO is, could you describe your role and how you interact with other C-level positions such as CMO, CIO, CTO, et cetera?
Yeah, happy to do so. And thanks again for welcoming to your healthcare party. Just to be clear, Fox is not in the healthcare business, at least not yet. I think this was sort of a way for us to get an outside view of outside the healthcare sector. But to your question, Justin, yeah, I was actually the first chief digital officer for the Fox TV station group. So it was an inaugural position that was created when I joined. And also to be clear, so the part that I'm the chief digital officer in is the local television portfolio of within Fox. So if you're in LA, you would know KTTV channel 11. If you're in New York, you'd know WNYW channel 5. So we have basically 18 stations around the country that Fox directly owns and operates. And that business is where I oversee the digital business. But I think in a word for the chief digital officer for Fox, for the TV station group, my job is basically to, in some ways, be the chief executive of the digital business. And by digital, what we mean is, traditionally media companies, for us, has been a television, operation, which means, towers and TV and, control rooms and, all the traditional media. But obviously, as your and my habits change to consuming media over the phone or through the, your desktop or through Roku or Fire TV or all these new digital platforms, there's a lot of different things that go into consuming and producing and distributing media on those platforms. So that's sort of what I oversee. But within sort of my oversight, there's the product and engineering. So these are the software engineers and the product managers that help define the roadmap and actually build the digital products. Then there's the content side of it. So we actually have a team of digital journalists at each of our local TV stations who are creating content for digital. So I also oversee the content side. Then there's the marketing and the partnerships. So deals with Facebook or Google or Samsung or all these other ecosystem partners that are different than the traditional TV partnership. I also oversee that. And then of course, there's the sales part. We have a president of sales who's sort of my partner, who oversees all of revenue, including the television. And we have a digital vice president of sales who reports to the president of sales, but also dotted lines into me so that we can make sure that sales is part of that. So it's really a digital chief executive in charge of driving the digital business from a P&L perspective, and all that comes with it. So I'll stop there. And my interaction with the other C-level officers is, very frequent, because as we'll talk about soon, digital sort of pervades almost everything we do now. So we're not, and we should not be just a silo of that's the digital team and I'm not. Digital really should be A to Z on everything we do in every function. So I have a lot of interaction with my other C-level partners.
Well, that's good to hear. Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. Everything, even businesses that are traditionally not digital, are definitely picking up the speed in their transformation. So I think that's really interesting to hear. As you mentioned, the audience for this is primarily focused on digital in healthcare, which is quite interesting. So being that you're in television media, I think you talked about some of this already, but could you describe what you see as some of your personal roadmap and challenges look like over the next couple of years, especially given the situation with the pandemic and more digital interactions and everything else?
Yeah, and I might try some forced analogies here between what we do and the healthcare business. And part of the reason why I wanted to come and speak to y'all was, I recently I had an aunt who was involved in a serious accident that required brain surgery, and so over the past 2 months, I've had the chance to interact with the healthcare system and the digital and not so digital parts of it. And I think we in some ways are very similar. How media generally has been around ever since we've known it, and of course healthcare is been around ever since we've known it in different forms. And I think there's sort of two parts to it. There's the what do we do in our day-to-day mission that can be enhanced by digital workflows, whether it's efficiency or sort of connecting the dots faster, or easier ways to look up patient care, or there are obviously corollaries to how we can use technology to accelerate what we traditionally have done. But then the second bucket, which I think there's a lot of opportunity to do that, obviously, and for us as well. The second part, which may be a little bit more of the frontier part of, sort of digital as a medium in and of itself, and, a little bit more than optimizing your workflow. So for us, as an example, all the new devices that are coming to the market, and 20 years ago, it used to look like a cable box, and you would sort of pick up your cable remote and go down the electronic program guide and what's on this channel, flip to the next. Well, today that remote has been replaced probably by a Fire TV remote or a Apple TV remote or a Roku remote. And now the choices and the interaction are very different. So the challenge for us is, okay, how do we not just take what we did and make it into a digital version of that, but rather how do we take these native platforms that offer so much more in terms of interactivity and the ways that we can tell the story and connect with our audiences. And for us, our primary content is local news at the local station level. So especially, you know, as sort of the political discourse and all that comes with it, and I've been wrapping up over the past year or so, you know, how do we use those digital tools to really create new kinds of content and interact with our audiences very differently as a medium in and of itself.
Yeah.
And, you know, perhaps the healthcare sector, you know, I had a chance to do basically like a Zoom version with my aunt who was in a surgery ICU for, you know, several weeks. And with coronavirus, you know, COVID-19, we couldn't visit her in person. So we were assigned to just basically doing video Zooms. But I got to tell you, I think it was a valiant effort, but the user experience from being able to connect to that patient in that room was something to be desired, even though I think that hospital did the best they could. So
Right.
I think there's a ton of opportunity for healthcare, and what more important mission is there than to save lives and to, you know, keep us well.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting story. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I think you started to answer the next question as well. So you're continuing to be one step ahead of me, Steve. But in general, you know, in the next 1 to 3 years, what do you feel are the biggest challenges ahead for organizations who are in the midst of ongoing digital transformation? Technology, customer service, customer privacy, you know, those types of things. And do you see any parallels from your industry to the healthcare industry? I know you're talking about that a bit, but is there anything that you see that you're working on that you think would be really portable to that other vertical?
Yeah, you know, I would say all the tactics of how to make a digital business successful, I think is arguably the easy part. You know, there are people who know how to do that. And if everybody got the right, enough time and money and focus, you can do that. I actually think the biggest barrier to sort of customer driven transformation on digital is the status quo and the traditions of the decades and centuries of history that maybe our respective industries share. And that is, you know, for, I think the healthcare business, you know, I'm not certainly an expert, but you have sort of a core business model and the whole system has been built around that. And, you know, and that's a lot of baggage to carry. And so while everybody might understand, hey, if we do it this way, this is going to really benefit the patients and it's going to benefit the healthcare providers and the insurance companies and everybody associated with it. But you just can't get there because there's so much you got to pull through. And I think the analogy for us in our industry, to me, has been Disney Plus. And yes, Fox competes with Disney, and we, you know, fight vigorously for ratings and relevance. But I think the moment from my perspective, when Disney Plus became a thing, and that was sort of a stake in the ground for Disney to say, hey, we are actually all in on this new digital front, and all of our great assets are going to go to focus on Disney Plus, and all of the traditional models of selling our content to cable partners and you know, all of the different people who are involved in that, and you know, all of basically the whole infrastructure of supporting the business, you know, over the past several decades really had to go to the wayside. And it wasn't until really Disney Plus came on to be seen, because prior to that, I think digital was sort of this cool, sexy toy, but you know, it didn't generate the significant revenue relative to the core business. And it was something that we all kind of knew we had to do, but it wasn't really a catalyzing moment where it really meant billions of dollars for the respective organization. I think what Disney Plus's moment is not only the consumers are shifting that way, but the shareholders and the investor community started to focus on competitors like Netflix and Hulu and these digital native companies that are really disrupting the traditional media. And so really from the investors and from management and from the team, really it was like a perfect storm of really just breaking through. And there's a lot of cleanup to be done. And well, what are you going to do with all this existing business that's generating so much cash flow? But, you know, we love to pick on Blockbuster and say, look, you know, we all knew Blockbuster. We loved Blockbuster, except for the fact that you had to, you know, pay this onerous late fee. And here comes Netflix, makes it convenient. And Blockbuster said, yeah, what do we got to go into digital for? You know, we have a great business here. And, you know, we know how that story sort of turned out. So I don't know what that moment is for the healthcare industry, but it certainly is going to be a tough slog if it's just an organic, internally driven process. There's got to be a big catalyst, in my view, whatever, and maybe that's COVID, and maybe it's something else that really just shifts everybody, and it's like, no, can't look back. It's a point of no return. That really was the Disney Plus moment for the media industry. Yeah. I hope there is that moment for the healthcare industry for the benefit of everybody as well.
Yeah, no, that's really terrific insight. You know, to that point, I think you're spot on. You know, some healthcare organizations, I think it's really fair to say, are just getting started in their digital transformations and maybe doing it from the inside out and not sure where to invest and things like that. So what advice could you give to a healthcare organization seeking a CDO, or perhaps someone who's looking to take a CDO role in a healthcare organization?
You know, I think it's an interesting question. You know, half of my job is education and evangelism, you know, and if, you know, and most of my career has been sort of centered in Silicon Valley, and I'm based in Los Angeles now. And, you know, I would say, again, not being an expert in the healthcare sector, like in media, you know, there are people who've been working in this sector for 20, 30, 40 years that have done a phenomenal job getting our industry to where it is, but don't necessarily understand the words of digital, or maybe not as familiar with the terms, and maybe it's intimidating. So I think, you know, my general admonition to any chief digital officer is, don't be that guy or gal who goes in there and starts spewing a bunch of acronyms and, you know, talks about technology and just to show off, or, you know, show everybody how smart you are. Those days, I think, are long gone. I think if you want to, you know, be effective, I would advise against that, right? So I try to really understand my sector, the language, and really understand the perspective of my sort of peers who have been in the industry, who are much more expert than I am, and to really understand them first. And then from that point of view, start educating and evangelizing and over communicating and saying things. I guess Jack Welch said something like, you got to say something 7 times for somebody to actually understand you. You know, I find myself repeating myself all the time. Maybe I've repeated myself on this Zoom call just because it's now habit, but, you know, I would say half of it is really education and not having people feel stupid or unqualified for not understanding digital as well as you do. Because I bet you don't understand what they do, you know, half the time as much as they do. So anyway, so I think part of it is really education, using words and vocabulary that's not intimidating, so people feel like you're accessible, and that they, you know, that it all comes down to people, and that you take care of them and their feelings and their perspectives, and you respect them. I think that's a good place to start. I think the second part, again, is I have no doubt anybody who's sort of in a chief digital officer role can do the job. Again, I don't think that's the fight. It's not about, can you do the tactical things that people know how to do. It's about bringing people with you. And second, you know, getting those catalytic moments to be transformative. And I think that's cultural, and it takes time. But hopefully there's an external event like a Disney Plus moment. And again, for you, maybe it's COVID-19, coupled with strong leadership from the chief executive and the board down. And then for the chief digital officer to take that energy and plot a path that is easy to understand, and that it's something that people can buy into. So just one story to wrap on that. I mean, when I started this job, I spent the first month what I called the listening tour. I probably knew everything that needed to be done already, but maybe I didn't. And plus, the process of me actually sitting down and listening to the general managers of each station and the news directors and the digital people and the sales people and the creative people, and hearing their perspective really educated me and reminded me and reaffirmed my thoughts when going in, and I made a few changes. So any sort of new chief digital officer, I think it's always a good thing to begin by starting to listen. And then after that listening tour, I summarized it and I read it back to the organization and said, this is what I've heard from you all. And so there's no misunderstanding. This is not my idea. It's not any particular, this is a collective, process that we're all undertaking. And I think that really set the tone nicely. And we've had some phenomenal success over the past almost 3 years that I've been here, growing, 30, 40% year over year on our revenue and our traffic. And it's been a great fun ride. And I think for the most part, everybody's sort of been part of that journey together. And if there are some people, the bad apples, who are sort of the negative Nancys or the whatever the other equivalents are of these negative folks who bring you down, sometimes you got to just take people off the bus. And those are the hard decisions.
Yeah.
And you can't carry with you somebody who's a naysayer all the time. It's draining. So in some select points, I think those are necessary to make those tough decisions of who's on the bus and who's not.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice, Steve. Thank you for that. One last question, and this might be the toughest one, but you were very kind to share earlier a very personal story about how to interact with a patient through Zoom, through video, and things that are probably non-traditional. And you mentioned the hospitals are probably doing their best. Maybe using your creative brain a bit. Are there any improvements that you can see from that encounter that maybe some of the folks here could think about and maybe bring into their organization to help with that patient care?
Yeah, I'm sure there are so many things like, why do we have to wait hours sometimes for doctors to show up? And they all have legitimate reasons, right? Or can we interact with patients more interactively rather than through a grainy video? But I think, the one thing I maybe want to leave, and that this is something that I think I struggle with constantly, because when we think of business problems, we immediately think to what's in the building, like what are the systems and processes we have. And what I try to do, and what I've been encouraged to do by my CEO, and therefore I pass on to you all, is to really be customer centric. And I know that sounds so cliche, but actually the most successful people, arguably in my view, are the CEOs like a Jeff Bezos, who are so centered on the customer experience. So for the healthcare industry, what is that patient experience from A to Z? And you probably can come up with 9 different ways on everything of why something had to be the way it is now. Maybe it's the insurance company, maybe it's the hospital administration, maybe it's the funding, there are so many different reasons why the status quo is the status quo. But for every 9 of them, if the chief digital officers could be that 1 out of 10 that continues to bring the team back to, well, what does this mean for the patient? What does this mean for their loved ones? And I would say that the doctors and the nurses and the providers are also obviously key stakeholders for you as well. And what is their experience like? But overall, I think we all agree that the healthcare system is really for the patient, right?
Yeah.
And if that is the guiding light, making every decision and say, does this make sense for the patient? Does this make sense for bringing the best care? And I think if everybody stuck to that North Star, as we should in the media sectors, like, I don't care if this creator or that distributor or whatever, at the end of the day, what is the best consumer experience? And that's where I try to bring the conversation to. So as cliche as it sounds, if the chief digital officers could be ultimately the chief customer experience officer, and in fact, everyone, all the C-level suite should think of themselves that way, to be honest with you. But the chief digital officer could then use the digital and the technology tools to make that customer experience the best. I have no doubt that success will be there. And it might take time and it may take some disruption, but I think that's something we all should hold each other accountable to.
Well, as a customer experience strategist, that's music to my ears. So, well, thank you, Steve, for your time. You've been very generous today. I think you gave great answers and great advice to all the folks joining here, and really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And if I'm on LinkedIn, so if anybody wants to connect and you know, pick my brain, I love to pick your brain on what you're dealing with. I think the industry and the world is so interconnected. So I have no doubt that things that I do and things that you do, we have a lot to learn from each other. So I welcome staying in touch with the healthcare community, and thank you generally for the amazing care that my aunt has received for the past 2-3 months through the system. Thank you.
All right, very good. Thanks, Steve, and back to you, Ed.
Well, that was another fantastic CDO insight, learning about the perspective from media. You guys rocked it as well. Thank you so much, Steve and Justin. That was awesome. Took a lot of notes too. First, we're glad that your aunt is doing well. And thank you for sharing that experience. And you really do learn a lot when you're in it as a patient, as opposed to just working in it. The patient perspective is so key. And that goes back to one of Angela's points, where they have 7,500 type of working groups for patients engagement. The thing I picked out were two main things was the Disney Plus moment. What's the Disney Plus moment for healthcare? Well, hopefully it's happening now. We hear great examples today, and we know others exist as well. So we should all look to bring a Disney Plus moment in our organization. Again, whether it's payer, pharma, what have you, we should all be looking for that Disney Plus a moment. That was excellent, an excellent way of describing that. And the other thing I loved was when Steve talked about the CDO stands for Chief Customer Experience Officer. And he went on to say really everyone in the C-suite should own that title, but definitely the CDO. And, bringing it back to healthcare, again, this is a little bit more provider specific, but given the experience he had with his aunt, was things we all wrestle with wait times and engagement and just the quality of services that we provide. And really to go back to, I think one of Steve's first points was really, what did we say often in health life sciences? We'd say, don't repave the cow paths. So you have to respect history and build off of it, but don't repeat it just with fancier technologies. So really, really great. So thank you so much for being part of our health and life sciences conclave. It was really good to get that external voice. So moving right along, I get to introduce another fabulous guest. It's Dr. Albert Chan from Sutter Health. He's the Vice President of Chief of Digital Patient Experience. I've known Albert for a long time. We're Facebook friends, those sort of things. I went to visit him one time because I was so impressed with his organization. And I think we were downtown San Francisco and they had the most amazing offices. And I don't usually take pictures of people's offices, but with his permission, I was taking pictures of his offices because the creativity and the collaboration that it naturally gave you that vibe was pretty incredible. And I've always been impressed with Albert whenever I can. Whenever he was in Cleveland, I would get time with him, or if I was in California or in Madison, Wisconsin. Just a phenomenal leader of all things digital, as well as a physician. So he is the corporate championship for transformation of the web and mobile healthcare services for Sutter Health, making sure it's all consumer-centric, digitally empowered, those sorts of things that you would understand the background here at Palo Alto Medical Foundation. So a lot of pressure for his organization being in Silicon Valley and treating patients that work in some of the more advanced digital industries. So with that, let's turn it over to Dr. Chan.
Hi everyone, it's Albert Chan. I'm here to talk with you today, the CDO influence and patient experience. I think we can all remember back in March when the stay-at-home orders for COVID-19 first happened. This is a slide that reminds me of what in our state, California, Governor Newsom issued the stay-at-home order. And I started to get to thinking, what in our lives has changed because of COVID-19? For example, for the first time, I've taken advantage of contactless curbside pickup. It's a new experience for all of us. And for the first time, I ordered DoorDash food via a mobile app. Again, a digital experience. What's remarkable is what companies have changed and survived and thrived versus what companies have not during the pandemic. So you can see on the left, some companies like Tractor Supply, Lululemon, Microsoft have thrived during COVID-19. Others, including historic brands like Brooks Brothers and others, when you're forced to be socially distant, your sales do suffer. And my commute has certainly changed. It used to take me 2+ hours to drive to our headquarters in Sacramento, and now it takes me all of about 1 minute to comb my hair and get out of bed and come to my office. And I learned something very different about Zoom and teleconferencing, and I've developed the Zoom face just to remind us of how life has changed. This brings up a broader point of what I'll call the fourth industrial revolution. You can see in this graph here, this is actually, I borrowed a slide from Dr. Eric Topol. And I think the fourth industrial revolution is here. That really artificial intelligence, big data, robotics, and most importantly, digital is here to stay and is going to profoundly influence the way medicine is practiced today and to the future. Why do I think this is so important? Let's look at this graph. This graph shows data in our electronic health records. As you know, over the last several years, the United States has gone through a transition where we've essentially digitized all our records into the electronic health records. What's interesting about this data inside the electronic health record is who accesses that data. And in green shows the access by doctors and nurses and other care team providers, and in blue shows access by patients. So this graph shows me the profound influence of patients in the patient experience and the need for us to empower them with digital solutions, technologies. Now we all have to admit patient experience is quite complicated. This graph just shows the complexity of medicine and navigating care. And we at Sutter Health have really tried to determine what are the barriers, what are the things that get in the way and the impediments to getting great care in our care processes. As you can see here in this graph, medicine's complex. Whether trying to book an appointment or pay a bill or other things of that sort, it often is very, very challenging. And in my opinion, the only way to solve this really at scale is digital. So much so is we've actually taken an opportunity to take a hard look at our patient journey from end to end, from pre-service to time of service and post-service, and say, hey, what if we fundamentally map out each one of the steps? Can we, essentially to improve patient experience and efficiency of our care practices, can we digitize each step of the patient journey in some way? Either looking for automation or self-service, or just reduce the barriers to care that exist today. I'm going to share with you some examples. First, I would like to highlight this picture, which is the bridge to nowhere. And I will argue that if you don't essentially map out your care processes and understand what are the barriers to your care delivery, you'll essentially build this great digital bridge, but it'll be a bridge to nowhere. So one of our focuses is really to say, can we highlight and understand what our practices are today, and can we leverage workflows and optimize workflows to take advantage of digital? I'm going to share with you now some examples. So during COVID-19, you've by now all heard of the term personal protective equipment, or PPE. In some sense, because in my opinion, everything is touched by digital, we created this term digital personal protective equipment, or digital PPE. And these are multiple steps we took to try to make the lives of patients safer in our care institutions. So for example, we added AI navigation to make it easier for patients to navigate to care 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We added video visits so that patients could receive care no matter where they were in the state of California. We implemented contactless check-in. The idea there, you could perform any of the same functions like checking in for appointments, signing documents, and even being alerted automatically in your care center that you've arrived, so that you can minimize the time you sit in the waiting room for care services. And we've even extended this concept to our employees using a QR-based employees COVID screening to improve safety and screening. Let me share with you now some data that we've achieved with some of these initiatives. Here's a slide that shows our AI symptom navigation tool. We have a partnership with a company called Ada, and the goal is really to have the patient find the right care location, type of care for the right condition. Essentially how this works is patients navigate with this AI symptom checker 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, have a conversation with ADA, and then instead of replacing doctors, essentially what they get is symptom advice to where to get care and what type of care. And it essentially is more efficient for both parties because obviously patients want to be navigated to the right place inside of care. As you can see on the graph here, on the left is our average assessments per day prior to COVID-19. And you can see up to 181% increase in assessments after COVID-19. The beauty about this is we essentially added several hundred assessments per day without adding a single doctor to our mix. And this provided robust advice for our patients. And super majority of our patients rated this as highly useful and helpful as they navigated care. Perhaps more striking than that is our experience with telehealth. As you all know, as many care systems around the country experience, telehealth has really changed the landscape with regard to care, and virtual care is, I think, here to stay. Here's some data that shows our transition and what happened. Essentially, prior to COVID-19, we used to perform about 20 video visits per day, fairly modest number. After COVID-19 started, we ramped up to a peak of 7,000 video visits per day. We went from 50 physicians being able to provide video visits to over almost 4,700 video visit practitioners. As a percentage of total appointments, we used to do less than 1% of appointments done by video visits, and at peak we did up to 30%. And truly expressing the power of digital, we went from a rollout plan that was slated to take 2 years, and we got it done in 4 weeks. To me, that's only made possible by digital training. So we essentially created new training models. Instead of in-person training, we had virtual trainings, up to 5 sessions per day to fit doctor schedules. We had central deployment. So to ready our devices for technology for our physicians, we essentially onboarded 4,000 plus iPads centrally, loaded the software we needed, and then deployed them locally to our clinicians. All in a matter of 4 weeks. Again, only made possible by digital, in my opinion. And what happens when you do this? This is some patient satisfaction surveys as a measure of a net promoter score. That is, how likely is it for our customers to use the service again and recommend it to others? And you can see here, the data of video visits is on par with our in-person experiences. In other words, in my mind, this is a testament to how well our physicians care for our patients, empowered by digital. Digital creates new opportunities. We are a Northern California-based institution, but you can see here on the graph here, in green is zip codes where our patients receive care. And though we're in Northern California care delivery system, you can see here in green in different parts of the state, patients sought video visit care, virtual care throughout the state of California. And our lives have certainly changed forever. This is a quote from one of my colleagues, Dr. Srinivasan, who said, "Telemedicine is perhaps the only silver lining of this horrible pandemic. It is transformative. I don't think we'll ever go back to medicine before coronavirus. There's so much time to spend interacting one-on-one with the patient. I felt for the very first time, the entirety of the visit was spent caring for the patient without distractions. Over the next few weeks, each and every day will be shaping the way we practice medicine after coronavirus." And Dr. Srinivasan, I couldn't agree with you more. Now, many care gaps remain, and so we have to take new approaches to address care gaps that were created by the pandemic. And I'm going to share some examples, some strategies we've deployed to make that possible. First, I'm going to let you pause a second on this picture to give you a sense of what some of the things that confront us. So what does this picture show? This is a picture of a 24-hour fitness site with stairs down the middle. You'll notice the caution tape across the stairs in the middle, and 2 escalators that flank the entrance. We have to think about our care design and think about how we engineer approaches so that it's much more likely to align incentives to get the care outcomes we want. In this case, obviously, the incentive is not to use the stairs for exercise, but rather use this escalator, and that's just the wrong approach. Similarly, if you were an airport bathroom operator in Europe, what would you do to reduce cleaning costs? You might use behavioral economics approaches like putting a little fly in the bottom of the urinal encourage your customers to use the right approaches. I started thinking about this thinking how can we use this science, this behavioral science, to improve care delivery for our system? And again, delivered by digital. So here's data. We essentially, the two things I'll remark on the slide are, one, digital involves really the ability to rapidly test and iterate. So essentially we followed that same model. We had a phase 1 and phase 2 of this project, whereas phase 1, we took a select group of patients as our test bed, and we said, let's try different behavioral economics approaches to get patients to book an appointment for care delivery. And you can see here, there's email A and email B. We essentially did an A/B test very rapidly. And we said, what theme works better to get our patients to take advantage of our systems to book an appointment? And then once we figured out the winner, which in this case was email B, we extended to over 500,000 patients. And what we saw was using the winning email message, again, delivered digitally to get our patients to book an appointment, we saw a nearly 5-fold increase in online scheduling through this intervention. Similarly, when we looked at screenings, for example, cervical cancer screenings, we said, how can we encourage our patients to get these needed cervical cancer screenings? And how do we reach out to patients digitally? Because obviously, if you had to call patients individually or email letters or other things, it would take a very long time. So instead, we used our digital patient portal and said, what can we do to deliver digitally to get them involved in their care? And you can see here in red, Pap smears, the alert for Pap smears were delivered for your traditional methods. In other words, a control group saying you need a Pap smear. And in green on the right, an intervention that encouraged uses of behavioral economics techniques to reach out to patients. And you can see here the test completion percentage was much greater in green versus red. Here's another example. A few years ago, we had an alert. We had this challenge that confronted us, which was, how do we alert patients that they are eligible for hepatitis C screening? And so some of the approaches we thought about were call campaigns or email campaigns or websites or letters. We decided on a digital intervention. What we decided to do is essentially put materials online to explain why you should get hepatitis C screening, and then link an alert inside our electronic health record to prompt, and our personal health record to prompt people that they were eligible for screening. And you can see here on screen what happened once we did that. In blue, you can see the baseline activity of hepatitis C screening prior to the implementation of the alert. And after you put the alert, again, 6 words that said basically you're due for screening for hepatitis C. You can see on the right what happened. Over several 100,000 patients were alerted for those very 6 words. And we actually discovered several hundred cases of patients who needed ultimate intervention for hepatitis C. Again, the power of digital. So I think what awaits us is really a concept like this. This is what everyone thinks of digital. This kind of reminds me of the Matrix, but it's really a digital front door. That's the concept most people have in their heads of bits and bytes and electrons. But I would posit that instead, actually what we're doing is bringing care to the front doors of our patients' homes. Each and every family, different families across the country, adapting to their needs. We have different types of families, different types of environments, different types of homes. And we're able to reach people at scale because of digital. And there's no more gratifying feeling to be able to serve all these patients in our community. I'll close with a concept that happened just before the pandemic, actually. MIT every year highlights the top 10 breakthroughs in 10 breakthrough technologies in the universe. And you'll notice number 2 is hyper-personalized medicine. Again, I'll posit to you that hyper-personalized medicine is only made possible by digital. What we're doing by digital technology is not, digital solutions is not to just add technology to the problem and add technology to the solution, but rather personalize the experience for each and every patient, extending the best practices and scaling to a population, but ultimately tailoring care to individual patients and their families. With that, thank you for your time, and I look forward to collaborating with you in the future. Thanks so much.
All right, that was awesome, Albert. Just as I expected, amazing examples, very practical. And I would say that probably a good portion of your success that you all have had at Sutter is really because you were pretty well prepared in advance. And I think that really showed all the work that you've done over the years really prepared you for success. So I took so many notes as with every speaker, trying to pull out the big ones. I think the behavioral economics, the idea around behavioral economics was powerful, and how you can really shift people's decision-making and engagement based on that. And I think the examples that you gave with using colors to alert people, and then of course the awesome example of the fly in the urinal. So that was really good. The other thing that you talked about really was physical design as well as just pure sort of digital design, and how the two work together. But ultimately, you also brought it home that it's about the front door, how critical that front door, that's what we're doing with digital, is we're bringing everything to the front door of the people that we serve. And that ultimately, that is why we do what we do, and that is to serve people, whether we're on the payer side, pharma, provider, the whole gamut of health and life sciences. Ultimately, at the end of the day, that's really our common mission. And don't forget, we're chatting it up on YouTube. So if you're able to follow on YouTube, there's a lot more insights. All the speakers have been there throughout their talks, engaging with you. So if you have any other questions or comments, and then people are just building upon one another, and it's really quite amazing. It's just another stream of learning. So we're going to head into our last speaker. It's hard to believe that we're already coming at the end. And we have Dr. Ashish Atreja. And I don't know how many of you know of him, but he is awesome. I've been friends with him for a long time. When I first went to the Cleveland Clinic, I was really looking forward to serving with them. But then he had gone to New York City already. But I connected with him in New York City multiple times. He's just a fabulous person, as well as very insightful. And he's going to be talking about prescribing digital therapeutics and monitoring. And so a whole new area, part of that fourth revolution that Albert spoke about so eloquently. So he's associate professor and chief innovation officer of Mount Sinai in New York City. He's founder of Node Healthcare. If you've ever participated in any of their conferences, they're excellent. He's a common speaker, on all things digital, and he leads an in-house digital medicine innovation lab at Mount Sinai. So he does a lot of one-of-a-kind, first-of-its-kind, entrepreneur, innovator, just an amazing person and clinician. So with that, please welcome Ashish to our conclave. Ashish.
Hi, it's a great pleasure to be here and talking about a topic that's very close to my heart, prescribing digital therapeutics and digital monitoring for all. The time is now. I'm Ashish Atreja. I'm Chief Innovation Officer in Medicine at Mount Sinai Health System. And I'm also scientific founder and board member for RX Health, which is spin out from Mount Sinai. Ed asked me to share my journey, especially at Sinai journey, and how we went from innovation to really wholesome transformation. We call it a fit journey from innovation to transformation. So I wanted to give a context, as we were second health system in the country with a digital health innovation lab we established in 2012. There's been a lot of learnings, and we truly believe the time has now come where digital health can become mainstream, but we require platforms to be able to prescribe digital health. Very briefly about Mount Sinai Health System, it's an 8-hospital network, integrated delivery network with 7,000 physicians, 500,000 ER visits across all boroughs of New York City. And one of the things that unite us is our mission for population health. This is a statement from our CEO: if our beds are filled, it means we have failed. This is opposed to many other hospitals in the country where fee-for-service is a major driver. We believe population health, providing care at home, is our mission, is our motto, and many times that's the best care. But the challenge we faced when we embarked on this mission many years ago is, how do we really provide care at home to the patients? And we need more tools. Electronic health records are typically for the physicians, but there's nothing for the patients in them. So we actually looked at digital health and creating this entire set of tools and taking from the startups those tools to really create an ecosystem where we can start to provide a care which is better sometimes and many times than the hospital care, but right in the homes. This is our innovation center. Our mission was apps plus analytics is equal to awesome outcomes. The apps we had built have gone to 15 countries, and a whole community now we have created based on digital medicine. And we really looked at this emergence of this new field of digital medicine. And this is an exponential technology where the scalability happens not linear, but exponential. And we have seen 350,000 ml taps, but more importantly, we are seeing virtual care like in COVID, variables, sensors, AI machine learning, augmented reality, chatbots. These are not disparate because they all come together and unify at the patient through a smartphone. And what our effort has been, while they're unifying at the patient side through a smartphone, how can we unify them from a health system side, from the care team side, by embedding them within electronic medical record? And as you know, the wearables, implantables, digestible have really grown. And then how do we not be dependent on one device, but actually make an ecosystem where new devices can be rapidly added on, and new digital therapeutics can be added on as well. So for example, this is a Trailblazer WellDoc application, which is one of the first digital therapeutics to be prescribed and approved by FDA. And the reason they got approved was predominantly because they had the evidence in a randomized controlled trial to decrease diabetes HbA1c by 1.2%, which is very much equal to what a medicine would have done. But the major challenge we as our health systems, health plan face is major fragmentation in digital health space and lack of evidence. This is actually a perfect symbol of how complex and how fragmented the digital health landscape is. And how do we go away from this point and click solutions to really make it whole and wholesome for our health system? At the same time, what we want to do is really take away this burden of proof. We really want to be sure everything that we bring on into our ecosystem is evidence-based. So we have a trust, very much like we have a trust in prescribing a medicine because it's FDA approved. How can we build a trust where it can actually be better for the patients and we can prescribe digital health apps? So we've created a new association, a new society called as Node Health. We have 32 health systems now which are partnered, increased from 20 health systems, and also partnership with AMA, ACC, Academy Health, and HIMSS to really have startups, these new solutions, health systems, health plan, VCs, all coming together, but we surfacing up the solutions which have the right evidence. And if they don't have the evidence, we build evidence for that during this network. And our mission is to really take the innovation that you all are seeing, really combine with the rigor of evidence-based medicine, because none of us can do it alone. We have to do it as a community, as a peer network. And then we create the science of evidence-based digital medicine, a term I had coined 4 years ago, and then really can help all of us. Every year, we share the evidence that has been generated by all these health systems and startups and big tech companies. And it becomes a great peer networking and learning environment through Node Health Digital Medicine Conference. Now, once you learn, these are the innovation, and these are some of the innovative tools which actually have some evidence. How do you really reduce it to practice and bring it to your patient so no patient, no researcher, or no clinician gets left behind? A lot of our last 4-year journey at Mount Sinai has been assimilating things together and really leveraging a platform approach to be able to do that. So we embarked on this mission using a consulting firm, and then we kind of came with this concept of Digital Daisy as our roadmap for digital health adoption, where we say there's a digital experience which patients get, but also caregivers can get and care team can get. And within that, you have embedded all those technology, the technology which is synchronous video visit telemedicine. Even though that is widespread, we feel the biggest wave is actually digital monitoring and digital therapeutics. Because in video visit, we still are logged to the same physician within that 30 minutes window. But if you actually create digital twin of yours or digital therapeutics, you can prescribe care plans to thousands and millions of patients without spending time from the physician or the care team member. And I'll share examples of that, what we have done during the COVID phase. One of the key reasons we were able to accomplish so much in the last 4 years is because we spent a lot of our money building a platform from grounds up, which is now available outside Mount Sinai as well, through partnership with American College of Cardiology, AGA, and Hospital Association of New York State and RX Health. So we were able to create a platform which embeds within EMR. In our case, it has been Epic, but now it's embedded within Cerner, Allscripts, as well as Athena Health, where you are able to take the best content, the best digital therapeutics, the best wearable devices, appointment scheduling, clinical trial enrollment, all of them. And you can actually, if you already have some of those tools, through a Firebase API, you can integrate those tools very rapidly and create your own health system customizable toolkit, right? And each health system has to have its own unique asset there. So when we did that, we were able to show a patient activation really leapfrogging from 6% to 92%. And the reason is, if I, as a physician, I'm a gastroenterologist in that regard, but if I tell a patient, hey, for inflammatory bowel disease, you use this app, the chance a person is going to download is 6%. And the reason being, they're going to forget the name, they're going to mistype the name, they will get lost with 350, 450,000 apps, or they will get challenged with signups and those kind of things. By activating them and prescribing them right from the EMR, we already know who the patient is. They are able to do a deep link and single sign on, and right, they get into the app. And that activation has been key for us to launch any digital program that we want in any shape or form, right from our EMR within a matter of weeks. So again, this shows our network that we have now expanded to, and it's a very collaborative network. We share and learn from each other. Some of the solutions that come from Yale, we adopt and outside as well, includes New York City Health and Hospitals, which is one of the largest public health hospital system, community hospitals, academic hospitals, national societies, and now we've created centers for excellence with different health systems and health plans. I'll share a few examples on how you can take this approach and really embed into different use cases. Now we have more than 250 digital care plans for 250 different use cases, all embedded within digital health library that can be unlocked. And I'll share just few top ones for you. Heart failure, as many of you know, is a very big issue among majority of health systems and health plans with a very high readmission rate. And we realize that many of those can be reduced if we track the patient's vitals and their symptoms immediately after they get discharged and get them into the right path. So we were able to connect blood pressure machine and weighing machine with our app, prescribe to patients before they get discharged. So they knew how to use it. And we were getting 75% of the patients using them, 73% of the patients using them nearly every day or every alternate day for the first 30 days. We were able to show 50% readmission rate reduction because the data from them was getting into and alerting our care team member. In addition, as you can see from the smartphone, we had a care navigation which was guiding the patients automatically what to do for blood pressure control, what to do for weight control. So not only they were checking their blood pressure, but we were guiding them what is a good blood pressure for them, which is lacking in most of the RPM devices. So I think by combining the deviceless digital monitoring with a device-based monitoring, we were able to achieve a very high engagement and a very high outcomes improvement. Now we can expand this model to COPD, many other devices and diseases where this can actually play a big role. The technology these days now with the COVID, we have really expanded now to actually add a 4G hub where patients don't even need an app to be able to transmit the data. Any of these devices are used, as soon as they are used, the data comes from the 4G hub directly to our dashboard, and our care teams, it creates an alert for them and they can act on it. And these are live dashboard, not only alert comes, but they can actually trigger a video call from here. They can trigger a chat from here to make sure the patient is not just running and then taking a blood pressure. It's actually true, and they can guide there right there. That reduction to intervention by reducing it to less than 30 minutes has been key for us in preventing many readmissions and really having a super high patient engagement. And this allows a dashboard creation toolkit in the platform with a remote patient monitoring toolkit, which are all embedded through Firebase API, and a prescription toolkit and digital health formulary. So it's all those are interconnected assets all on one platform with the data science on the back on Microsoft Azure platform in our case. So this just shows another visualization of how any of the connected devices can now flow in. And now with the codes for RPM and CCM, you can actually get paid around $100 per physician per month by leveraging RPM. The other way we've been using a lot is in our population health ACOs, where we are taking risk for those in our employee health. We are able to actually give these devices for uncontrolled population wherever the devices help. But wherever there are no devices for that, we are able to do SMS-based or app-based deviceless monitoring, and that has been really helpful for us. Being an academic center, we also wanted to see how we can further the cause and become a glue between clinical research and clinical care. The same platform we have been using, we are able to now use it to prescribe a mini app or a SMS-based enrollment for clinical trial. And this figure shows the data. We were really struggling with recruiting patient population. We recruited only 16 patients in 6 months. We turned on this SMS-based remote monitoring, reached out to 1,800 patients or 1,300 patients from our EMR at 8 a.m. in the morning. By 12 noon, we had 500 patients getting back to us. And by 5 p.m., we had 206 patients enrolled. This has never happened to us before. This shows the timeline. So now we have embedded this workflow into what we call as a decentralized trial toolkit. So many of those patients can be recruited, e-consented, then followed, engaged, and electronic patient report outcome and remote vitals being collected, all through the same toolkit we are now using for research as well. And this is courtesy of RX Health, the spin-out we have partnership with. So really, what my single most message to you is, don't think of one use case and bring one technology. Think of multiple use cases. Think of where the puck is going, what's you gonna be needing as CIOs, as Chief Digital Health Officers, whether it is digital front door, digital therapeutics, or digital monitoring. And look at how can you enable a platform approach where multiple use cases get actually settled, or you can implement them within one go. So heart failure readmission reduction, we actually did the same thing for peri-procedural, peri-surgical scheduling, to reminders, to bowel preps, to post-surgery and procedure follow-up. Showed 58% in reduction in aborted procedures. We showed half-day reduction in length of stay in bundles for knee replacement, 20% patient more going to home. Recruitment, as I mentioned, and during COVID time, we leveraged the same EHR integrated digital health platform to reach out to 1 million New Yorkers and 55,000 people we were able to enroll within 8 weeks. So talking about COVID, we were able to quickly realize that we have a lot of our own employees which are at risk for COVID as well. And how do we quickly build a toolkit, taking the best of the bot, the telemedicine, and remote patient monitoring, and putting it together as a COVID toolkit. And then we were able to launch this toolkit for Stop COVID NYC program, where we were able to reach to 1 million New Yorkers. And it also assessed not only COVID symptoms, but also social determinants of health, as you can see from a SDOH bot. We actually partnered with Yale through RX Health, and we were able to enable from few hundred telehealth visits a day to 7,000 telehealth visits a day. And the reason we were able to do that is because in video visit, the major challenge is not video visit per se, but all the onboarding of the patient beforehand and following up after the visit. And if we can automate that using automation or SMS-based activation, we can actually go much more faster on that. What has been very fulfilling for me personally is we've been actually taking the same framework on COVID and actually taken to many other countries. Swasth is a new backbone initiative. It's becoming the telemedicine backbone of India. So we actually have partnered with them to bring all the COVID-specific workflows and the digital toolkit that we have created, very rapidly launched. And now one of the leading hospitals in India, Medanta, is leveraging our digital monitoring platform, which is device-less remote monitoring on the COVID symptoms and the data coming back. So again, talking about reusable assets, talking about multiple use cases all on the framework. So you are able to move many, many things in parallel rather than in serial fashion. Now we are partnering with multiple health systems and health plans internationally to create global center for excellence in digital therapeutics and digital monitoring, because our philosophy is really to achieve a highly efficient care and highly effective care. Science of medicine is there, but we really have to empower the delivery of care. And digital health, being an exponential technology, can really help us scale delivery of care like never before. But we cannot do it alone. A network of health systems which have using different use cases and building different assets, but on a common platform on a cloud, we can share each other's asset or give our license to each other assets or do revenue share, and we can all win together. So I'll conclude by just saying the time for prescribing digital health for all has come, and not only in US, but globally. We have done around 2.5 million prescriptions in the last 1 year alone. Innovation gets the journey started. So start somewhere, but really for transformation is what you should be looking at, and trying to look at how to go away from point and click solution to bringing things together. And also bringing not only health systems, but also pharma and life sciences together, because then you can create a value that has never been realized before. I'm sharing my email with you and happy to correspond with you. And it's a great group, and very excited to be part of Digital Health Leaders Group. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Ashish. That was awesome. And a lot of great points. I love the digital DAISY model, the evidence-based digital medicine. And if there was one main key point that I took away, and we saw some of that in the chat, was really, and why we created our conclave to begin with, is really the interconnect. And you can see how we need to work really closely with pharma, and again, the payers and biotech and all of the health and life sciences. And so I think that point came out of your talk brilliantly. So I just wanted to say two things. One is thank you to all of our speakers, just fabulous, amazing, very thought-provoking, very provocative, great ideas. I took so many notes. It's just driving me crazy right now in my mind, all the things happening in my mind. And then thanks to you, the audience, for participating, and especially on Twitter and also in the chat, just being so engaged. And let me wrap by saying this, just as when we started 2 hours ago, this is an association of chief digital officers. You see the website, Digital Voices. You can contact any of us or on LinkedIn. If you want to be part of our loose association, that's commercial-free, vendor-free, just a free exchange of information, trying to knock down the silos that we identified today, please let one of us know, and we will include you, and we will get kicking in earnest in 2021. We already have an amazing opportunity with World Economic Forum to do something pretty special. So we want to add value to the world as well as to our organizations. So please join us and reach out. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time. Have a great day.